Hello, everyone, on those TCGCs. Welcome to the Romance Dawn One Piece TCG podcast. I am Gabriel. We did have a little bit of a hiccup, so this episode is coming out after the event that we're talking about being nationals. I was traveling quite a bit, so was unable to, edit everything correctly and put this episode out on time. Still wanted to re-upload it and make sure that you guys got the full extent of the conversation. I think it was a really great conversation between myself and Michael Artress, esports friend and One Piece TCG player. Super excited to get his insight onto things now and in the future. Yeah, shout out to the esports bros, the people in the industry playing this game, and happy to have Michael on. Hope you guys enjoy it as well.
Welcome, Michael. How's it going? I know in the preamble I kind of mentioned kind of like an esports connection here. Do you want to dive into your experience with that first and kind of how we cross paths in a sense?
Yeah, for sure. First off, I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course.
I and you and I kind of are in the same scene for a little while of esports with more specifically like League of Legends esports. And I remember, so I know that I worked on the management side of things. So I worked on like team management, a little bit of coaching here and there, and worked with players directly on that regard. And I believe, if I remember correctly, you were more on like the coaching side. And I remember where I think this is probably incorrect, but at least the one time I remember our paths crossing was there was an event at Riot where they were kind of like helping coaches understand how to coach better. Like they had on like these little workshops.
Yeah, that
And
was a very long time ago.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
ended
was
up
like 2018, I believe.
gosh, dude, I don't even know anymore. Like with time, it's like what year was it? It all feels like pre-COVID and then post-COVID. So if
Yeah.
2018 sounds about right, we'll go with that. But yeah, so I remember you were participating in that event, and I joined it as well just to kind of gain a little bit more knowledge get some insight on like what goes into the
Of
coaching
course.
staff, like what they like
And
to
you were on Team Liquid, right?
yeah. Sorry, I didn't even set that up. Yeah, I had been with Team Liquid for quite a while. Actually, that was my entire esports career. I was with Team Liquid on different different multitudes, but for the most part as a manager there. But yeah, I joined it that coaching session just to kind of get an idea of like what coaches are trying to attempt to do when they're going into a game and like talking with the players and things like that, just to help get a better idea on a couple of levels, just understanding like who to hire and how to hire better, and then also how to help out
For
the
sure.
coaches that were already in place. So that was, I think, probably wasn't our first interaction, but that's the one that I remember that you were at. And I remember you were asking a lot of good questions to the person that was hosting it. Whereas like, I'm going to be honest, a lot of the people that were at that event were kind of just almost in snooze mode,
It
just
was like
laying
a
back.
mandatory,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you
See,
actually,
I was like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, just moved from Canada.
yeah, you
Yeah,
actually
it's a
you
little
actually had
different
effort.
energy.
Yeah, you put some effort
Yeah,
into it.
yeah.
So I mean, I remember that at least. So, but for the most part, yeah. Outside of that, I know that you were mostly a part of the teams that you were a part of, and then I stayed with Team Liquid and kind of, even though everyone's like in an esports realm, not everybody interacts closely on a day-to-day basis. So we do see each
No,
other at
not
like
it's not common.
yeah, we do see each other like at Riot Studios on the weekend and say hi and things like that in passing. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was a fun experience, fun time. So I do look
Did
back on that
did
fondly.
did you end up going at all this past weekend to the studio? I know they had week one there. I'm actually in. We're recording this January 25th. I'm in Los Angeles right now. I was just there this past weekend, but I was curious if you tune in at all anymore or jump into that.
No, I actually didn't attend this weekend. So for me, I haven't really kept like paid as close attention to esports or like LCS in general since I've left the scene. It's one of those things where I'd been working in it for a while, and so after a little while, just to be honest, like I got a little bit burned out, and so I took a step away from just kind of keeping close contact with what's going on there. And nowadays, I do what I'll do is I'll like see what's going on with like who beat who, if Team Liquid did they win this week, kind of thing. But
Are they doing well? Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I can tell you they went 1-1.
yeah.
That's
So
good
like
news.
I can't tell you like what the KDA was or like things like that, the specifics. But I do keep like a
Sure.
distant eye on what's going on. But admittedly, not as close as maybe I should have, considering how closely I was involved in the past. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, watching from afar, just making sure everything is stable is okay. Seems
Yeah,
like they're doing okay overall.
yeah, for the sure.
That's nice to hear. One of the things that really stood out to me when I entered, I've only been playing this game, One Piece since October. Um,
Oh, nice.
a big regional event kind of clued me on it. I'm a huge fan of the anime and the manga, and just jumping into it, and of course a huge fan of card games as well. But jumping into it, just like realizing how many people in esports like love playing this game. I had mentioned, before we started recording, like a bunch of players that I worked with love the game, and they, some of them keep sealed boxes, some of them still play. Um, and then I discovered that you played, and also that you're very good. So
I
good
wouldn't
in
say
fact
that.
we're going to
No,
talk
no,
a
no,
bit.
no, no. I wouldn't. I feel like I'm garbage. But yeah, it's so interesting that you brought that up. There's a fair amount of people in the esports scene that I guess started getting into One Piece card game, and it's really cool to see because it's one of those things that maybe I didn't connect to somebody in the past, and now there's like a good direct line to be like, oh, you play? Oh, sweet. What do you think about this deck?
For
Or like
sure.
things like that. And it's also people that I didn't expect to be into the game. So I feel like I saw recently, maybe it was like I forgot who it was. It was somebody Doa. What is his name?
Oh
Monty's.
yeah, the caster.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
He
he's casting this weekend.
yeah, he was like talking about like he had built decks and had things ready to go, and it seems like he knows the meta, and so it's really cool to see people getting into the actual card game. Considering like I feel like it's very much in its infancy, being within a year of its release, so it's cool to see
Yes.
that.
Well, I appreciate you being humble and modest, but we do have. I'm a little more results oriented here, and I do have a second place finish for you here. That does at least we can. I know you played yellow, but we can at least attribute some of it to skill, right? So
Yeah. We can say that. Sure.
sure,
It's
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I know that like results are definitely a way to say, oh, you're good or not. But I feel like I'm constantly learning how to play the game, despite me doing well in some tournaments. And obviously, as many times as I've done well, there's times that I do poorly. And I know that like going into like the nationals this upcoming week at the time of the recording, like the past couple of weeks, I've been playing at locals and I've just been getting absolutely just wrecked, like smashed by people
Oh,
at
that's a
locals.
classic.
You know,
That's
uh,
a classic.
yeah, and it feels awful. It's like, oh my god, it's like scrims for esports, right? It's like, oh, scrims have
Yeah,
been going awful this week. Am I going to do bad on stage? So it's like one of those things where I am more like focused on how I've been doing at locals, and I feel like I'm just awful
for
because
sure.
of that. So
Gotcha. Well, we're gonna get to that. I think first there's a really big event for us to cover, which is, we talk about regionals here coming this weekend, but there was a regional championship last weekend,
actually, the
which I think is pretty
national
exciting.
championship. That's the so
Well,
even
is
further.
it? It's European, right? I don't
Yeah,
know if you
yeah.
can classify it really as national. It's continental, let's say.
Fair.
Yeah. So that was a huge event. I believe it was 2,200, 2,300 runners, if I recall correctly. So
Yeah, somewhere around
this
there.
event's total. And we had a pretty interesting meta game. So I'm just gonna pull it up really quickly. So I'll get into like the totals in terms of amount of submissions. So we had about 20, looks to be about like 2,300 decks,
That's insane.
770. Yeah, I mean, I wonder what this weekend will bring in North America. I wouldn't be surprised if we eclipse that number, in
Right.
all honesty.
Yeah.
Um, we have 778 Sakazuki, 482 Katakuri, 471 Enel, and those are kind of the three biggest decks, and it looks to be about, I would say, 30% Sakazuki, and then the other combined would be about 32% of the metagame, and then the remaining kind of big decks to talk about are Plouffe, Zoro, which we'll talk about how Zoro did at this event in particular, and Newgate, and then kind of scales down from there. So in terms of conversion, we had pretty solid conversion rate from a lot of decks. I think Enel and Sakazuki converted at about just under 5%, I want to say. And then Zoro, which, kind of alluding to, did very
Yeah.
well comparatively, where there's about a 10% conversion rate of Zoro. This is to the top 64. So Zoro with the actually second highest representation, beating out the yellow decks in the top 64. So pretty crazy stuff. We can go over that, but the
Sure.
other big thing is that half, I believe, of the top 16 was Sakazuki. Then 6 of the top 8 was Sakazuki, and the entire top 4 was Sakazuki.
Yeah.
So seems like we have a little bit of an issue there. Just wanted to get, I guess, your initial thoughts on all the numbers I just threw at you.
I am not really surprised. Obviously, Sakazuki has been a long-standing contender for best deck and format in the Eastern meta or the Japanese meta or Asia meta or whatever you'd like to call it. It's one of those decks that has been figured out for a little while, at least in that regard. And there's been, once it was introduced into the North American scene and the European scene, has been added a little bit of text here and there, seeing the 10 cost Kaido come in. And I know I've seen a few Mihawks be added into the deck list, but overall it's one of those that it's very consistent, and it is, if you've put a lot of practice into it, a very strong deck, hard to beat overall. So not very
Yeah, it
surprising.
feels like it goes even at worst
Yeah,
if you play it properly, right?
I agree. Yeah. It's not very surprising that, to me, that it is the most represented deck. And of course, being in the top 4, all 4 were Sakazuki. It makes sense. I will say, though, I am shocked that it made it those people that were piloting the deck all the way up to the top 4. There are times where sometimes you just kind of brick or you don't see what you need. So making it all the way to the end and winning it with Sakazuki is a hard task, I believe. Not saying it's an easy deck at all. It's definitely a pilot difference deck, But yeah,
Yeah.
overall, not surprised to see that. I'm gonna say that I am a little bit surprised to see how many Katakuris there were. I thought there'd be more Enel versus Katakuri, but I think
Yeah.
we've seen a lot of people start to trend more towards Katakuri as of late. I know that I was just talking about locals, that my locals the past 2 weeks have been a tremendous amount of Katakuri. I know that there's a lot of people that were on Sakazuki to begin with, a lot of people that were on Enel for a little while, and then I've noticed that a lot of people have started to switch over to Katakuri. So I think that Europe also was seeing that trend. And I guess the other thing that I'm surprised about, talking about the results overall, is definitely Zoro. As just not necessarily the results of Zoro doing well, but the representation. I think that seeing that many Zoro decks is a little bit shocking to me, simply because Enel is in the meta, and I think the win rate against Enel is pretty abysmal for Zoro. I think it's close to
Most
17%.
most most red decks are very scared of Enel. I think
Yeah,
overall it's just hard to
it really is.
finish that leader off.
Yeah.
One of the things, to your point about what yellow deck is being chosen, one of the interesting things about the European meta that we addressed in the last episode was actually the fact that Enel play rate in Europe was trending down because the win rate was actually stagnating, and all the good yellow players were actually picking up Kata instead, and the win rate was skyrocketing. Like we saw Enel at the beginning of '05, Enel and Katakuri keep similar win rates. It was about 52% ish. And then Enel kind of staying at 51, while the Katakuri win rate in Europe, like bigger European tournaments, like 64 people plus, go to like 56 and 58%. So I don't know if that's like a regional choice. a lot of great red representation and red decks may mean that Enel can kind of like, do better against the field, but maybe people just feel Katakuri can do better against Sakazuki specifically.
I think a lot of people are looking to try to do better against Sakazuki. That's probably why Katakuri is the choice for a lot of those people. So at my local, there's a guy that he's won the past couple of events. His name is Justin. He won with the Katakuri in Core TCG's Pasadena Regional, and then he won with Enel at the Core TCG's Los Angeles Regional, the one that we just had like maybe about a month ago. So he's won like first place, and he has been on Enel for the entire meta, and then he's one of the ones that I talked about switching over to a Katakuri as of recently. I don't know if he's going to take it to NA Nats, but I think Europe has kind of understood that, okay, Enel, if you play it well against Sakazuki, you can have an advantage. There's certain ways to play it that you can have the advantage, but Katakuri, just dropping the 10-drop mom and deleting a life against Sakazuki's, yeah, it's just hard for them. Like, you have to, at that point as Sakazuki, you have to wall up and just hope that there's no way for them to like rest their units with Amaru or bolt to them or whatever it may be. So in that regard, Katakuri probably is a little bit more advantageous against Sakazuki.
Yeah, I also just think this is a little underrated, but they're both decks that, they're yellow. You're entering the yellow casino, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Just having 5 life to get initially trigger off of, and then still get the night life gain. You're just getting more chances to affect the board state off of what you do with Katakuri. I think Enel, because most people are starting to play well against Enel, is kind of just a 5 life leader at the end of the day. Like, no one's really like, people are starting to realize how to play against Enel such that you're not giving the Yamato life immediately, you're not giving the Enel life immediately. They're actually like building a board and playing around Enel properly at 2 life, such that you're not giving Enel those additional trigger opportunities. I think if I recall correctly as well, looking at the deck makeups, it seems like more triggers exist in the Big Mom shells than in the Sky Island shells, and I think that might play a part as well.
I think so too. I think that a lot of the Big Mom Pirates builds have a fair amount of bodies that come out of life, and it's really hard for Sakazuki to swing at something and then, something just came out of the field. Now, how do I get rid of this thing? So they may spend their entire turn getting rid of one body only to swing at life for another body to pop out. So that's really annoying. And that doesn't happen as much for Enel. It does happen. There are some triggers and events like that can come out and kind of screw up the game. But yeah, you're right. I think a lot of people have figured out how to play against Enel. Doesn't mean that they're always going to win against Enel, but there's definitely a strategy that people have been implementing to be able to have some advantages.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the other big things to note about this tournament, the EU tournament, is how many Enels and Katakuris we did see in the top 16. We did see more Enels overall, which is kind of interesting. We don't have the win rates as of yet, so I'm not quite sure what that is. But it's interesting to see that even with this shift that we see in Europe and potentially an upcoming shift in North America, what that's gonna translate to when it comes to who's making it to top 64, etc.
I have a feeling, and I know that we're talking about EU right now, but just really quickly, I think NA will probably see, I know we're going to talk about predictions in a bit, but we'll probably see a fair amount of yellow. So I did want to touch on one thing, though, for a couple of things, actually, with EU Nats, is that there was that one blue Nami that made it all the way into the top 8.
Yes.
That was that was crazy. I watched, I think, a couple of that guy's matches. I, just out of curiosity, wanted to play it, so I have been doing like YouTube content for the past couple of months on different deck builds.
Your Sakazuki one today, right?
Yeah. I took a stab at the number 1 list, and that was actually my first time playing Sakazuki. But I was playing a little bit.
Ever?
Yeah. One of the reasons why.
Before we jump into Nami,
yeah.
How did you find that?
I played a lot of Rebecca in OPO4, and I really enjoy playing control decks. The reason I haven't played Sakazuki for the entirety of this OPO5 is because I absolutely despise the character Sakazuki from like from the anime and manga, and so there is no way
He does kind of suck.
Yeah, he does kind of suck, right? I know there's some people that are huge Navy fans, but like I just can't. I can't fathom playing the deck because I don't like the character. And I know that sounds weird, and there's probably people that are like super into the meta and like play just to win. But if I'm playing a deck, I want to play a deck with a character that I enjoy from the show or from the manga. And so Sakazuki is definitely not one of those. And that's why I haven't touched it. But of course, that is the most popular deck. And so I wanted to take a stab at the winning list. And it's strong. Me not having any practice on it and then going into the sim and just like doing pretty decent is... it speaks on the deck, you know. So, but yeah, overall, I that's the reason why. I know it sounds weird, but
I think the floor of that deck, you know, it can really, it's really easy to get the basics down. But like you mentioned, it's one that you need to pilot. It's a pilot difference at the end of the day, right? Like, if you sequencing matters so much. In those tough like mid game situations that those are just things that it's totally dependent on your deck tech choices. You know, there's like 4 slots or so that can really determine that. And then afterwards being able to figure that out and make sure that, you know, those tech choices are appropriate based on the deck you're playing against or the meta you're expecting, right? So if you're expecting a lot of yellow, right, just as an example,
I think it's one of those things with the deck as well as there's so many little nuances to what could happen in a game and so many situations that you can tell an experienced player will know how to get out of versus somebody that's just going into playing the deck for the first time. So it's one of those decks, I feel like it's comparative to Red-Green Law, where if you put in time from the very beginning, you only got better as time went on. To make a comparison to esports, it's like Melee. The more that you play Melee, the better you get, right? And like you grind it, and there's like so many things you can find over time. It's the same thing with Red-Green Law, same thing with Sakazuki. It's one of those where if you started from day one and started practicing it, by the time we hit like a regional or Nats now, if you stuck with it, you've probably are probably really, really good to like play on the deck. So it rewards you.
And also thanks to the sim, if you started 2 months before you even had access to the cards in person, you were probably golden now, right?
Absolutely. But yeah, no, to go back to the Nami really fast, I was so shocked. I went into the sim to play it because I wanted to see, okay, this person made it all the way to the top 8. How did they do this? It kind of makes sense. If they're not putting bodies on board, it may be good against Sakazuki, but it's so hard. Like I was only won like one game out of probably 10. And I was like, how did this guy make it throughout the entire tournament doing what that guy did? It was kudos to that person. I couldn't do it. And I imagine there's people that saw that and feel like, oh, I could be that guy. And then they're probably going to go to a tournament and find out that they're not. So
get smoked.
Yeah.
Are you doing this on the ranked sim by chance?
No, I actually haven't. I haven't tried the ranked sim, and one of the reasons why I haven't tried the ranked sim is I am kind of just lazy when it comes to that. I just want to go into a game really fast, and I have to like queue. I haven't tried it, so I don't know how easy or hard it is to get into a game. I just want to go into a random game, practice some mechanics, see how the deck does, and then call it a day, you know. But I definitely,
I will say, from my experience, the queue times are really fast. Like you'll get within a minute, like a match ready for you.
Oh, so that's not bad at all. I guess maybe I should try it out. But that probably would be better than facing randoms and then doing like mechanics checks kind of thing. But
sure,
ranked. I definitely think the ranked queue is a good thing overall. Now, what I would like to see is that introduced into the actual sim, have like a MMR system. But maybe that will come in time. Who knows?
For sure. Now, talking about a list that you're actually familiar with, let's get into kind of your Enel list and choices there.
Sure.
A couple interesting ones that I know some other creators have gone into. In particular, like Rush Katakuri was an interesting one. Walk me through the process in case someone hasn't heard. I'm talking about the starter deck. rush Katakuri in this case.
Yeah, so in case those that are listening are unfamiliar, it's a 4-drop. It's got 6,000 power, and it's on play. Look at up to one card from the top of your opponent's life or your life, and then place it at the top or bottom of the life cards. And then it's like if you have less life than your opponent, the character gains
then
rush.
It gets rush.
Yeah, so
that's correct.
Enel naturally being at a lower life level just from the start, right, being 4, you more than likely will be able to get the rush off of this. At worst, it's a vanilla stat line that gets to alter a life for you, so you get to see.
It doesn't have counter either.
That is a problem. So yeah, the deck making decision to put this in and this is one that at the time of the recording, I'm still like trying to figure out what the right move is, because I have about 6 hours until the deck lists are due.
Submission.
Yeah. And so this is one of the big contention points here, is like I'm trying to figure out if it's worth putting in or not. And initially, so I played in a tournament a couple weeks back, and I put the Katakuri in because I thought, oh, this card makes sense in this deck. Let me see how it does. And overall, it does put in some work, especially if you're going against Sakazuki. You want to try to pressure them as much as possible.
Put a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And so the Katakuri is able to do that. So that was like the decision behind it. I was like, I think I'm going to be able to face a fair amount of Sakazukis to where the point I can actually just play Katakuri and feel comfortable on my 6-Dawn turn, swinging a fair amount. Like an ideal turn here is like playing if I'm going second and my 4-Dawn turn, I play Ohm and get the Holy out, and then the next turn I swing or play down the Katakuri, check a life, and then go 5 Holy, 5 leader, 6 Ohm, 6 Katakuri, 7 Ohm, 7 Katakuri. That is a lot of pressure coming to them on a turn where they might not have a good response the next turn. And then you follow it up with the Rush Enel the following turn, which they are going to be really starved at that point, either by dropping cards out of hand, and then they can't answer that. So yeah, that was the reasoning for putting it in the deck. Now I'm considering taking it out just because it doesn't have counter in hand. So it can be a dead card at times, but otherwise...
I was curious how much of the peaking effect actually helps you in certain matchups, and whether that's relevant to your decision at all.
It helps a little bit in the sense that it's good for yourself for the most part. I'd say like 90% of the time I'm checking my own life and seeing what's coming up so that I have a little bit of knowledge on what I should be doing for their attacks. But if you're going against another yellow deck, then it is very useful. I've actually been able to like go down to 0 against like a Katakuri and then play this down, the Katakuri leader, and then play down the Katakuri character on my side, look at their life to see, oh, their last life is this. How do I play around it? And then go forward from there. So it does do work in that matchup as well. It's very nice to have the knowledge so that it's a little bit more of an ease going for like game finishers or...
Yeah, the mirror too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The mirror is also nice as well, although there's a strat that I go when I play the mirror that I don't really attack at all. So it doesn't really, like seeing the life, what they have, It doesn't really matter to me as much. But in certain situations, if I'm trying to go for game, then I definitely want to see what's there. But yeah, in any kind of yellow matchup, it's really good. I also really think it's strong in the purple Luffy matchup because they don't expect another body to come down on 4 that can hit one of their rested bodies. And I try to pressure their hand as much as possible, and it does that for you. So I definitely think it has some good matchups, or is in it has advantages in matchups that you might not expect.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen packages running around with like full play sets of all the rush that you can have, like 4 of that and 4 of the Rush Enel, and just not even starving, but just attempting to put as much pressure as possible early because you think you can win the aggro race, which I think is like an interesting strategy, all things considered.
I actually was trying that out. So going into the past couple of weeks, I've been trying out different builds with Enel, and I had 4 Rush Enel, and then I think I had 2 of the Rush Katakuri, and
yeah.
I don't mind it. It definitely, if you're expecting Sakazuki the entire time, it's great. But I feel like I need a little bit more balance because I'm not going to be facing Sakazuki the entire time, right? So there are some matchups.
I feel like you want more Rush Katakuri in that kind of build though, because on 10 Dawn, you're able to drop 2 6K rushes that could be 7Ks if you want to use a Dawn on each one or something like that, right?
Yeah,
And then suddenly you have like 2 more attackers that are going to get 2 cards out of their hand at least.
I don't think that's bad. I do think that there's people that maybe undervalue the Rush Enel. There was in the one of the EU deck lists, I saw one of the topping list only had one Rush Enel, and I think that's crazy because this card is so hard for people to remove. Like Katakuri, Rush Katakuri is good for that immediate pressure, but you can probably count it as gone the next turn because it's going to be hard to defend, or you don't want to waste too many resources out of your hand defending it. Whereas like the Rush Enel, I'm pretty comfortable just swinging with it and being like, okay, come at me. And if you swing up and I can't counter out, I'll just use the effect. But if I can counter out, sure, I'll do it. And now you have another 7 coming the next turn. How does that feel? You know?
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting philosophy on it. I definitely see both sides. Interested to see what deck list you end up going with. Are there any other considerations or changes from your second place list that you're considering right now?
I was thinking about bumping up the 7 cost Big Mom because I know that in some matchups it does put in work. And I was talking to Justin about like what he thinks about it, and he is very much a 7 cost Big Mom advocate, and I am more of a Russianelle advocate, but I wanted to try out 2 Big Moms in the deck, and I didn't really like it as much, to be honest, so I might just keep it back down to 1, but that is one thing I'm considering. And the Katakuris, I was considering Cracker instead, because Cracker coming out of life it's a huge tempo swing for you, because oftentimes when an opponent sees it come out of life, it's a little bit of a shell shock. They're like, oh no, what did I just do? You know? And also at worst, it's a 1K counter, so it doesn't brick up your hand, but it is incredibly slow, and you have to kind of hope that it comes out of life for it to be really effective. So
yeah, you never really, unless they're like completely card dead, they have nothing in hand, you never really want to drop it.
Yeah, it's really awkward to just drop it. You have to like drop it and then be like, do you have an answer for it? And oftentimes people do. And then also the other thing with it is when it comes out of life, obviously you have to discard a card to put it on the field. But the other thing about it is it also ruins your next play, because oftentimes Enel plays on a curve. And so using that 1 Dawn to get the double attack screws up your curve a little bit based on what you were planning on doing. So it's almost like Magelling yourself in that point. Like it's really it's not the best play. And so I'm in between thinking Cracker is okay and thinking Katakuri is okay. So I'm in between those right now. I know some people are doing 2 and 2 in the deck, but I only have spots for 1 of them. So 2 copies of one of those. So
Need
that's
to decide.
Yeah, I have to decide. So I'm probably going to stick with Katakuri.
Do you find that the Enel list has been solved, kind of like they're similar to Sakazuki? There's like 45-ish slots that you absolutely must have, and then
I think so.
Remaining few.
I think so. It's just a matter of like what ratios do you want. So like for instance, I started off with 3 Thunderbolt and 2 Amarus. And now I'm more leaning towards the reverse, where it's 3 Amarus, 2 Thunderbolts. And I think the reason for that is that if you're going to go across Sakazuki, you need to see that card. You need to see Amaru to be able to go for game. And I wasn't, it's so strong. And I wasn't seeing it enough. And so Thunderbolt's great, but a good example in the Eggman tournament that I was in the finals, in my final match, I mulliganed my hand and I had 2 Thunderbolts in my opening hand, and then I drew into my third one, and I'm like sitting there like, what am I supposed to do here? and then my opponent swings at me, and of course as Purple Luffy, you should always counter out of the first one so they don't law you. But I had all bricks in hand, and I was like, what am I supposed to do? Counter out with my Thunderbolt right now? I can't. So
pray that a trigger shows up to discard. Right?
Exactly. So at that point, I was like, okay, maybe I should cut back on the Thunderbolts and maybe put something a little bit more effective in. And Amaru, a trigger, that's really good as well, as opposed to a Thunderbolt. Amaru triggers kind of help you stay in the game a little bit easier. Obviously, Thunderbolt trigger is really strong too, but yeah.
It also gives you just 3K, right? Even if you don't get the additional effect, it's still 2 Dawn 3K. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah. So it will.
Which is still relevant.
Yeah, it's a good Dawn efficient card. So it's, I think, overall very strong, and I want to see it more often than I want to see Thunderbolt.
Makes total sense.
But outside of that, oh, sorry, I was going to say maybe you can edit. Maybe you can edit this. But outside of that, I don't think I'm going to make any more changes to the deck. I think those are the only things. You're kind of right. There is like a certain core to the deck for Enel, and so sticking with that has proven to do well. I know that if you look at the topping list in EU, there's a lot of the same cards repeated over and over again. There's very much standard list, so don't fix
same ratios.
Yeah, don't fix what's broke.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna take a small break, and then we'll be right back with some Nationals predictions. Okay, it's not a real break.
Yeah.
Us, but... yeah. Cool. Okay, just give me 1 moment.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm just gonna shuffle places because I heard some background noise get picked up. You still hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you just fine.
Perfect.
Man, I wish Rebecca was still in this meta.
Well, if you heard my last episode, I made a pretty fucking crazy prediction, which was that Rebecca would top 16. That would kind of be like the Nami of NA.
Yeah.
Because I think the Sakazuki, it is kind of like a Sakazuki Hunter potentially if it plays the Starve style.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That's my. We had a hot takes. That was my hot take that we'd see that. I think Heart Pirates said Kid, what, like the green kid was his hot take. Top 16.
That's a real hot take. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was Green Kid. It was either Green Kid or Green Purple Doffy, like it was a green deck.
Okay.
I think Green Kid was the one. No one said Nami though. I don't think we talked about Nami at all.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't think that deck's gonna do that well. So
yeah, we thought I think RG Law was the other one, but we'll get into our discussion. So I'll count us down. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back to Romance Dawn, a One Piece trading card game podcast. Here with Michael Artress talking NA nationals, regionals. It's North America. It's also a continent.
Yeah.
I guess we can't really call it nationals. I guess unless you're American and the world is centered around you, then maybe you call it nationals.
That's probably why it's called nationals. It makes sense, but it's called nationals for some weird reason, even though there's other people playing in it. So from the different countries.
I know a few Canadians coming down to test their mettle. We got some pretty good people up here, so we'll see how they do. But just in terms of, we'll go over general predictions. I think one of the things that I really want to ask you about, I guess, is how much you think the LA meta, like the local meta around the venue, is going to impact what actually shows up in the tournament. Because there are quite a few One Piece players in California, quite a few good ones as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Yellow is kind of in this renaissance in NA, but in particular on the West Coast, that you don't really see, at least at my locals, it's not as prevalent in regionals and other areas. It's not really as prevalent as it is, for example, at those Coors TCG regionals that you cited earlier.
Mm-hmm. I think it will impact, like the local meta will impact the national meta incredibly so. It will probably be a tremendous amount of Yellow. Obviously, there's going to be a fair amount of Sakazuki. It'll still probably be the number one deck, but I imagine that we will see more Katakuri and Enel than we did in the EU tournament, simply because I think that in North America, there's a lot of players that like to play Yellow. And we've seen over time, not just in OPO5, but previously, EU likes to play a lot more of a control style meta. There was a lot of like there was like Black Luffy in previous tournaments. I know that like Rebecca was pretty strong in some tournaments out there as well. We've seen Smoker top consistently and like a lot of EU tournaments, but we don't see that here in North America. We see a lot of
red.
Yeah, a lot more Whitebeard, a lot more hit face, smash as hard as you can. And I think yellow does provide that, as well as like some of the other red decks. We'll probably see a fair amount of red decks as well still.
Yeah. One of the things that in the last episode we found super interesting is the resilience of Whitebeard. So Whitebeard carries in a lot of tournament reports. Despite its low presence, it gets top cut. It carries the highest and sometimes second highest win rate at a tournament. How well positioned do you think a good Whitebeard player is going into this tournament? With the belief that yellow will be kind of have an outsized presence.
Oh my gosh, Whitebeard was a mistake, man. Whoever designed Whitebeard, I mean, honestly, I love the leader. I think it's a really strong leader. It's going to do well. I think that it will probably see a fair amount more tops in this event than maybe we saw in EU. I think that a good Whitebeard pilot can probably take on pretty much any deck pretty easily. Well, if we see a fair amount of Zoro, Whitebeard does, I think, okay into Zoro. You just take all your life and then you just counter out of all their little small weenie hits. It does fare into Sakazuki. It just naturally swinging 6 is hard for Sakazuki because they only have X amount of like 2k counters. And then of course they do like to wall up, but you can just swing past it or just apply a lot of pressure. Against yellow, like Katakuri, Whitebeard has always been good against Katakuri, and so that's not really an issue there. Against Enel is one of the probably tougher matchups for Whitebeard. However, you have to kind of look for your top end. You have to find multiple new gates, which you can often do. So if you can play back-to-back new gates, you probably have a fair shot at closing out a game from there, because 2 to 3 new gates swinging at an Enel player is going to be hard for them to counter out of, even if they have been playing Katakuri restoring life or playing Yamato restoring life. New gates still a threat there. So I think Whitebeard has a very fair shot at doing very well in this NA tournament.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, based on the tournament reports that we have, like I mentioned, second highest win rate, etc. It seems like the deck does not do that well into Enel at all. That's kind of like the struggle point of it, but it does well into Sakazuki in particular. Like you mentioned, 6k swings are an issue. I think the other thing about Sakazuki that's really important to note is Sakazuki's blockers are 6k, and so when you get into this issue around or zero cost, which gets killed by like a Vista or Whitebeard or whatever, right? Then a lot of the blockers, or the reason these blockers exist, they just get cleared off the field pretty much instantly. So it's a lot of pressure on the Sakazuki player. They have to manage their life in their hand really well in that matchup.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Whitebeard can kind of just like autopilot and do what they need to do, but the Sakazuki player really has to put a lot of thought into staying alive, clearing the board, and then also establishing like a fortress for them that they can't get past. So there's a lot of things that Sakazuki has to do.
For sure. The other interesting thing is the Zoro presence in EU. Do you think that will translate to North America, knowing that NA was kind of like the region of red for a while?
That's a good question. I feel like there's going to be a fair amount of Zoro representation. Zoro's a really strong pick into the meta. It also suffers from the same problem that Whitebeard might suffer from a little bit, that Enel just has its number, but it does well against a lot of other decks that are top contenders. Katakuri struggles against all of the little bodies coming at him. Sakazuki doesn't really do as well against a wide board, which you can do pretty easily with Zoro. And even if they Lucci your board, you can just put out 3 more bodies the next turn, right?
You just reestablish it.
Yeah. And when you're playing these bodies, like you're playing like a Nami or maybe an Izo or maybe a Buggy, right? They get you cards, so you're not really losing anything in return by playing them. So yeah, Zoro I think is a very fair pick. I don't know if we'll see as much representation overall, but I think we might see a similar amount, maybe a little bit less. I feel like we're going to see way more yellow, but Zoro, I think, is a really good meta call into this tournament.
Sounds good. Now, we did a little fun thing, which was give me your top 16 breakdown. We did this last episode. So, top 16 breakdown. I made the bold call that in a regional we'll see half of Sakazuki in a top 16. That ended up happening EU. I still think it will happen in NA as well. Give me kind of what you expect the breakdown of top 16 to look like in terms of, you know, there's going to be one of this deck, you know, a ton of this deck. You know, give me an idea of what you think the top 16 will be. We'll see Michael Artress on the Enel. What else will there be?
I will definitely. So, do you want me to give you numbers, or you want me to just give like an idea of like what we? Because numbers wise,
whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, geez.
Yeah, however you want to break it down.
I think we'll consider like just let's get the easy one out of the way. We'll do probably like I'd say a fair amount, like maybe 30% is going to be Sakazuki. That will be, I think, an easy call there.
So 4 decks. Roughly?
Yeah, probably around there.
4 or 5.
I would say
5 out of 16.
Yeah, maybe around like 4 or 5. We'll see that. I will say that we'll probably see 1 to 2 Katakuri. We'll probably see like 2 to 3 Enel. I'm not keeping track of these numbers, by the way, so my numbers are going to be off.
Yeah,
hopefully you're doing
mentally,
the math.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now you're at like 10.
I don't play Sakazuki, so I don't do math. So that's the thing. What else could we see in the top? I actually think there might be. I don't think that we're going to see this, but I kind of hope for a Kaido, a starter deck Kaido, to make it to the top. And the reason why I say this,
a STO4.
Yeah, the reason why I say this is because Purple has gotten a lot of good support over the past set or two, and I've seen a fair amount of Kaido pop up randomly, and that Trash a Life is very interesting against like a Enel, for instance. And
we're being so disrespectful to Ploofy, everyone. By the way, like the first purple deck mentioned.
I know. Well, I'm sorry. I am sorry, but I do think that Kaido might have a small, like maybe one Kaido player could rise up and maybe get to top 16. But you did bring up a good point. Purple Luffy is a strong deck. Yeah, I think if it sees what it needs to see, it will do well. I don't know if it will make it to a fair amount of tops, so I could see maybe like one Purple Luffy
in your top 16. One, okay,
maybe one. I don't know if 2. Purple Luffy's a good deck. Don't get me wrong. Like it counters yellow if it sees what it needs to see, but also it does hurt itself along the way. And then hitting like Katakuri, for instance, hitting it for 7 every turn, that doesn't feel good for Purple Luffy. Obviously, it has Enel's number, but against Sakazuki, for instance, that's an uphill climb. And that is going to be hard for them. So I would say maybe 1 or maybe 2 Purple Luffy getting into the top 16. And is there anything else that really stands out? I feel like there's going to be actually a red-green law that is going to do well. I think we're going to see a red-green law.
Totally agree.
That deck
totally agree.
is good.
I think that's something we said in the last episode. We expect to see RG Law in the top 16. Very underrepresented in Europe, but I think the deck only really suffers against Sakazuki. And so if you have a good Sakazuki plan in that deck, whatever that looks like, I think that deck is still, to this day, it's been a year, but that deck is still good. I think still really, really strong.
I agree with you. I think that it was when the designers made the game, they thought, like, what's the perfect deck? Like, what is the most well-rounded deck off the bat? And Red-Green Law was that deck that they were considering. And now Sakazuki's also in that contention. I think we're going to see Red-Green Law stick around in the game for a while, and same thing with Sakazuki. But also, to touch on what you just said, with the strategy going into Sakazuki, I wonder if it's similar to how the strategy against Rebecca is in OPO4. And so what that strategy is that you swing hard with your leader very early on, like maybe stack 2 to 3 Dawn per turn. And then once you get to like a maybe 8 to 10 Dawn turn, you just put you just put your entire board out there and say, all right, you're down low life and answer my board. And if you don't, then I'm going to hit you hard the next turn and you better be able to counter out here. So I wonder if that's the strategy that people have been taking, that the good RG Law players have been taking into Sakazuki. I don't know. I haven't honestly seen too many Red-Green Law players as of recently.
Yeah.
But
the tech that I was told about that someone high level might be bringing to Nats is the Rosinante blocker as like their way of teching into the matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Just so that they can't KO, they can't loot cheat you properly. They have to one for one what you're doing. That they, it forces a Hound Blaze, it forces a Borsalino that otherwise would go to, for example, a Zoro
Yeah.
or a 5-cost Law. So
No, I totally agree. I think that that's a really good smart card to put in the deck because it causes your opponent to either KO something that they didn't intend to KO because maybe they want to, I don't know, like KO a Zoro or like a Luffy or something that's rested, right? But then the Rosinante blocker just prevents that, so they have to KO something else, and they're like, I just wasted this. So yeah, it does force the Hound Blaze instead, which is smart.
Yeah. So right now, by the way, you're at 13 out of 16 right now.
13 out of 16. Okay.
Yeah, we got 5 Sakazukis. We got 2 Katakuri, 3 Enel. Then we have 1 starter deck Kaido, one Pluffy, and 1 RG Law. Which I think
let me bump up Katakuri.
You want to throw Nami in there?
No. I kudos to that guy that topped. No, I don't think Nami's going to do well here. I think so. We'll put Zoro. We'll put maybe like let's take Kaido out. That's too spicy of a pick. I think Kaido's too spicy. Okay. So let's go let's add 1 more Katakuri. So I think that's 3 total Katakuri. 3 total Enel. Let's go 2 purple Luffy. And what am I at right now? Is that 15 or 14?
So you're at 13 plus the RG Law, 14. So you got 2 more spots.
Let's go 1 Whitebeard, 1 Zoro, just to be safe. I think that's my numbers probably are really skewed, and I'm gonna laugh when I look back on this and am completely wrong. All 16 are Sakazuki, but yeah, we had fun.
Oh man, well, believe in the yellow casino. There might be a few yellow decks that sneak in there. It won't be all 16 Sakazuki. I mean, I'll say this. That's pretty safe, Michael. If you had to give me like a sleeper pick outside of those decks to make it in to top 16, would it be the Kaido, or would you try and jump into something else? Just for reference, like I said last episode, my spicy crazy pick was Rebecca. So is yours going to be the starter deck Kaido?
Maybe. I'm really not sure if it can handle Zoro overall. Kaido is pretty strong. Blue-purple Kaido is also really strong. I've just gone against a lot of decks that have drawn a lot of cards, and it's really hard to get past that. I don't know if it's that spicy. That might be too spicy of a pick. I think the Rebecca is also a really good idea, although I don't think there's any... I'm going to say this and probably get some flame for it, but I don't think there's any good Rebecca pilots. I think they've all switched off to Sakazuki.
Sure, yeah.
But I do want to see a Rebecca in the top. Actually, before I give that my pick, in my offline regional for Core TCG, I made it to round 7. I think I was like X1 or X2 at that point. So it was like 5-2 or something, whatever, I think. And I went against a Rebecca. And I was like, wow, a Rebecca made it this far into the tournament and only lost 2 games. And I was really sad that I whooped them because I wanted them to do well. Coming from somebody that played a lot of Rebecca, one of my invites to this tournament is from Rebecca, so I have like a little bit of a soft spot for it. Yeah.
Join me in the Rebecca top 16.
Okay.
Prediction.
You know what? I will second that, just because I do think Rebecca is a very strong deck and it answers a lot of the meta. If there's that one person out there that is playing and putting in the time, I hope that they make it to the top 16. So I am going to agree with you. Rebecca will be the spicy pick to get into the top 16.
Thank you. Wow, that is reassuring, because that's the deck that I started with when I started playing this game. I just thought value engine so strong, and it can starve a lot of these decks in the meta pretty easily, I think. If it of course cycles properly, if it's built properly.
I think your hardest matchup is going to be Katakuri, but it's not impossible. Yes. And you know what is insane is that in previous sets you'd have to go like, well, I guess previous set, because it only came out in 04, but in the previous set you'd had to go like a 10 cost Kuzan in order to make the matchup bearable, because if it sticks, like, yellow has no way to answer that. But you don't even need it. Like, at this point, the blocker Rebecca that came out in OPO5 just recurs everything that you need, and you
so strong.
Yeah, I actually ended up playing against a category player that had everything that they needed, saw what they played 4 big moms, and I ended up winning that matchup as Rebecca.
4 10-cost
Yeah,
moms
yeah,
to survive through that.
They had I think they had 9 life. They had 9 life, and I was down to 1. What I ended up doing was they decked out. I ended up just cycling my deck to the point where I just had blocker, taking care of the one body that they put down to turn, and then they couldn't get through.
Just Luffy Kong gunning, clearing the big bodies.
Yeah, it was insane. I can't believe that I won that match, but it was like, you don't even need the 10 drop at that point. You just kind of just sit back, you just cycle your blockers, you cycle your deck, and let them deck themselves out. So, yeah.
That's
insane.
Wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is wild. I mean, if it can do stuff like that, then I'm even more confident. Any deck that can survive 4 10 moms, I'm all ears. I'm all ears to see that.
It's gonna take one hell of a pilot, but I believe. I'm telling you.
Hey, if there's a tournament for one hell of a pilot to show up, it's got to be this one.
Right? I know. I kind of. Here's the thing. Before I thought about Enel, I actually was considering playing Rebecca for this tournament because of just how strong I do think it is. However, it does catch random strays. So if you, for instance, if you go into an early match, like if you're in round 1 or 2, usually what you'll see is like random decks. You might not see the meta. You usually see the meta as you continue to progress through the day. Usually the early rounds are kind of like randomly going to pop off with random things. Like Crocodile is one of your worst enemies. If somebody's playing like a starter deck Crocodile, the blue one, then that might be an auto loss. And it feels really bad because you can handle...
Nami too, right?
Yeah, Nami's a rough one too. But yeah, it will take random Ls from decks that might not be meta, but the meta decks it definitely can handle. Actually, I thought about one that might do well, and I just thought about this... the Rosinante green-blue one. I think people undervalue that leader. It's weird, but it's also really good.
It's annoying, right?
Yes, extremely.
Like blockers, save your baby 5, like keep card advantage. Definitely can see that being, especially the birdcage version. I know there's a green-purple birdcage version.
I didn't know that.
Maybe there's like a Rosinante equivalent that people are doing as well.
I think it's one of those decks that I just play against and I get tilted because I'm trying to like get their baby 5 off the field, trying to get their sugar off the field, and I'm spending my early turns doing that. And then by the time they get to 8 Dawn, 10 Dawn, they play the Kid, and then they play their 10 drop Doflamingo, and then it's like, what do? You just wasted your entire time doing like trying to get rid of their small stuff, and now they have all these big bodies on the field. So I think it has potential. I definitely think it could do maybe top 32. I don't know about top 16, but I think it could do.
That's a great pick. I didn't consider it at all, but I think that's a very solid pick.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Any parting words as we wrap up this recording?
No, thanks for having me. I think that I'm glad to see that there's interest in the One Piece card game. I'm glad to see there's people that I know that are into it, and I hope it continues to thrive. Sure. It's one of these games that I think has a very strong fan base based off of just the IP, and I just hope it continues to have strong support and everyone has fun playing it. It's one of these where if you get sweaty and you start getting upset with your opponents and not having fun, what's the point of playing? And I think One Piece overall, the people that are playing the game are doing it for fun. So I hope that the game continues to thrive.
Yeah, super high quality people in the scene, super high quality cards and promos and the way the cards look. Gorgeous.
Oh my god, dude! I gotta say, like the artwork is insane. Like they're killing it. They're knocking it out of the park, dude.
Yeah, the game. It can only trip on itself at this point. So
yeah, I agree.
Very, very excited for that. Good luck this weekend. Unfortunately, I can't make it. But I do wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Hopefully, many good matchups, not many bad matchups, and hope to see you run really deep.
I hope so as well. I have, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I have been losing so many local matches, and it's.
Losing is learning, Michael.
It is. That is the key. Losing is learning. One of the things that I definitely have noticed is leading up to a bigger tournament, when I go into that, I usually lose a bunch of matches going into the bigger tournament, and then I hopefully do a little bit better, and I have seen that. So thank you for the luck. I'll definitely need it based off of my latest results as
Your
far as
deck
locals
choice
go.
as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that too. I'll definitely need the luck because I'll probably have a little bit of it because I'm playing Enel. So we'll hit the casino pretty hard.
Awesome. Yeah, just jam that slot machine, put it all on red.
Absolutely.
Get what else is there? Get a royal flush, get baccarat.
Full house, yeah.
Anything full house, yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks so much, Michael. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. This is probably we're going to do a kind of Nats debrief, and then we'll get back into non-competitive stuff for the listeners. But it's just so exciting. Like,
I know.
it's nationals. It's the regionals. Like, you give
It's
us some space to talk about this
I
stuff.
know,
It's
man.
awesome.
It's
a
so
lot of
much.
fun.
It's such a good time to be into the game because there's just so much cool stuff going on with the game right now with the Bandai Card Fest. So yeah, it's a really cool time. Hopefully, people will see this and be like, "Wow, this is actually a really serious game," and maybe more people will be interested in the game that weren't there before. So it's only uphill from here.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little debrief next week with a special guest on the ground.
Ooh,
really excited for that one, and yeah, hope to get you back soon and be able to hear from you about your experience with the event and also just about all things involving the One Piece card game.
absolutely. Hit me up whenever.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Michael. Now, for everyone else, this was the One Piece TCG podcast, Romance Dawn. Do you like the name, by the way? How are you feeling about that?
I do. I like that.
Our intro and outro music is Good Kids No Moo, DMCA free music from that band. They're awesome. My homies up north in Toronto, going on tour as well. Around NA and the UK now, recently announced, so shout outs to them. And yeah, hope you guys are staying safe on these TCGCs, and we'll catch you later.